Why don't you want to? You never do the intro.
Because you're good at it.
Thank you, Father. All right, so we're back. Your auto advocate, Ray there, Zach here, back with another, commentary on things and doings within the automotive industry. Ray's here to share his insight and knowledge. I'm here to poke and prod. Yeah, insight and knowledge.
Okay, so you really shouldn't start an episode by lying to the people. Insights and knowledge. I'm going to guess a lot, and and these will all be my suppositions. Whatever it is that I say, do not take it to the bank.
Yes, yeah, no. As your son, I learned that at a very young age,
particularly with regard.
Yeah, all right. Anyway, we could joke about that all day, but there is some really serious news today. Every day I peruse automotive news. I know you look through it as well. There's a lot of good resources in there for the doings and going-ons within our industry. And one of the articles that just came across recently, let me actually read you the exact headline, Ray, because I want your take on this. And for our audience, and if you haven't subscribed, think about subscribing. We're talking every day about the car business here. So we've been talking recently a lot about used cars and when to buy used cars and when the price is going to be right on the retail side. And the headline here from Automotive News is, you ready? It's Hertz taps restructuring advisors as rentals fall, report says. And Hertz, that's Hertz, the biggest. They're the biggest rental car company, correct?
I believe they're the largest renter of automobiles in the world.
Yeah. So we've got the largest rental car company in the world, and I'll read just this little passage here.
Well, before you read that, the headline should have read Hertz, 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 Hurts.
And if anyone is watching along, you can play back right there. I started shaking my head before he started because I knew I knew what was going to come out of your mouth. Really, father, son.
But can I tell you, you've been around me for almost 25 years now.
Almost. We're getting close.
Yes.
So it says here, right? It says management is seeking advice from restructuring bankers at Moelis & Company, that's a debt restructuring firm, on ways to boost liquidity and avoid filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, according to people familiar with the situation. And the automotive news journalist actually sourced a lot of their information from a Bloomberg article, from Bloomberg News. So I guess, Ray, the question I have here for you is, the other day we posted a video and we were talking about the right time to buy a used car, and we threw out there 60 to 90 days from now, so May, June, July. What impact would the collapse, really, or the restructuring of a company like Hertz do with their rental fleet to the used car market? What's your take there?
Well, if they had to sell off their rather hefty rental car fleet in order to raise cash to be able to get out of bankruptcy at some point, I think that would have a really dramatic impact on the already shrinking value of used cars. I know, having spoken to a friend who buys cars for a dealer group, that one of the reasons they're increasing the amount of used cars they're buying right now is because, well, they got so cheap and they need to do what you and I talked about the other day, which was cost average their inventory, because, well, the inventory that they had on hand has lost value dramatically in the last 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah. So
if you add in them trying to dispose of whatever their rental car fleet is, that'll just, instead of used car values declining 10%, which is what they're expecting to decline for the month of April, the decline would be more along the lines of 15 or 20%, because you would just have such a vast number of used cars coming into the marketplace. And the sad thing for Hertz is, they have thousands, hundreds of thousands of rental cars just sitting because there's very little business travel. The bulk of their business is set up at airports.
Yeah,
and hell, some airlines are shutting down because there's no need to be open at the moment. So
Sure.
I don't know how it ever really gets better for Hertz in the short term.
Yeah.
And I don't know if getting rid of their inventory at distressed pricing for them is the best thing, but it might be for their creditors who would like to get their money.
Well, and so I guess the question, or the thing that I think about, Ray, is if they are going to have to liquidate assets, which this is all up in the air right now. We'll probably have more clarity here in a week or two. But if they did have to liquidate their inventory, the expectation wouldn't necessarily be that Budget and Avis and all the other rental car companies are going to want to gobble up those units. They might, in the same sense that dealers are buying cars right now because they have the expendable credit lines and cost basis like you're talking about. But you've got to think that if Hertz with hundreds of thousands of units, some of those are going to make their way to auctions that go to dealership lots, and yeah, would oversaturate an already depressed market.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't see Avis or Budget or Discount or Enterprise or anybody else wanting to pick up any of Hertz's inventory, because all the other rental car companies are in the same exact position that Hertz is in.
And the business case is actually really different between a car dealer who's buying inventory to sell it and a car rental company that depends primarily for their revenues on business travel. And there's no clarity on when business travel is going to come back. There's a sense, or maybe a tinge more clarity in terms of people buying cars, because we've seen even in some of the numbers from Manheim that the declines week over week are actually getting better rather than worse in terms of people buying cars. So there's maybe a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of dealers who are buying distressed inventory, but there isn't necessarily a light at the end of the tunnel for the Budgets and the Avises and the Enterprises to want to scoop up 50,000 Toyota Corollas.
And one of the things that we haven't discussed and I haven't really thought about was, the manufacturers depend a lot on the rental car companies that they sell directly to for the rental fleets. Well, if rental car companies don't need to buy cars, that's less cars for the manufacturers to sell.
Yeah. Which you can actually, Ray, you can already see. You look at like Daimler's stock price. I mean, it's just plummeted. And you compare that to actually something like a Penske Automotive Group, which has plummeted, but not quite as much. And I think the reason being there is a Penske Automotive Group is not a manufacturer, and they have a more diversified business. A Daimler, they sell cars, and all of their different buyers are less and less interested in buying cars. And on that topic, I actually have a question for you, which I think will resonate with our audience, which is, should you actually, as a retail buyer, what warning signs or what lens should you wear when you look at rental cars that have been purchased as used cars? Because if we do see a flood, if Hertz does go bankrupt, they liquidate inventory, and you go into your local Toyota dealership, you look at the Carfax and you see that it was a rental car. Is that a red flag? Is that a yellow flag? Or is that a good thing? What do you think?
Well, for me personally, rental cars were always a red flag. And it was a red flag for two reasons. One, typically the people that rented the cars really didn't give a shit about how they drove the cars. And two, I won't swear to you that they were maintained at as high a mechanical level as perhaps they should have been, or as perhaps is recommended by the manufacturers.
Sure.
So that for me created issues, but that's just me personally. I think for most people it wouldn't be a red flag, but it might be a caution flag. And because of that little bit of caution, and what we in the industry refer to those cars as rental rats.
Really?
Yes, that's what they were referred to.
Wow.
Because when you think about how they were used and how often they were used and how many miles could be put on one of those cars, it really negatively impacted the wholesale and the retail value of that.
Sure.
So if a lot of those cars make it to market, they're going to make it to market probably with less miles on them than they normally would have had.
Yeah.
uh, which could be a good thing, but they're still rental cars. You still don't really know how they were driven. Uh, when it comes to like retired service loaners that dealers sell, and yes, those were driven by dealership specific customers.
Yeah.
Those tend to be taken care of a little bit better than a regular rental car,
Sure.
and are driven considerably less because most dealers are turning them with the well anywhere from 1,500 miles to 7,500 miles on them,
Yeah.
as opposed to Hertz who might turn them at 30,000 miles.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, I guess
Yeah.
just putting two and two together, and we have to see what plays out here for Hertz and for the other rental car companies and for the manufacturers for that matter. But putting
Mhm.
two and two together, it seems like this further validates the case of waiting. Unless you desperately need to buy a car yesterday, wait. Give it till the summer at least and see what happens with some of these rental fleets. On the opposite end of the spectrum, if you're Team Volvo, like me, and you're sitting on
Yeah.
the S90 that you're no longer really driving but making a monthly payment on, it again means I got to get rid of that thing, and so do you. If you're sitting on a used car that you're not using and you're making a payment on, it's not paid off, get rid of it. I mean, you wait till the summer, it's going to be worth even less.
Yeah, they're depreciating faster than they've ever depreciated.
Yeah,
Historically speaking, because of what we're seeing now, used car values are going down faster than they normally would, especially on the wholesale end. Because there's not as many buyers for them. Not as many dealers are in a position to want to add to their inventory if they're having difficulty in relieving the existing inventory.
yep,
Um, so in order to get those sold at auctions, they're selling at a cheaper price than they have in the past. And the thing to remember that every time it gets sold, it still got sold to the last guy who had his hand up,
yeah,
the guy that was willing to pay the most for it.
yep,
Um, so yes, I think if you're not desperate for a pre-owned car at the moment, that if you can wait 60, 90 days, you're going to be better off. You're going to be able to take advantage of that dramatic decrease in the wholesale value of these cars. I don't think the retail decrease will be equal to the wholesale decrease, but it will still be significant enough that you should be able to secure a better deal
yep,
for yourself in 60 to 90 days,
yeah,
whether it be a rental car or whether it just be a trade-in or
yep.
yeah,
But you,
whatever it may be.
but you think about a huge supply side shock. I mean, you hear. I mean, a relevant and timely comparison would be oil, right? We saw what happened this past week, and even if you're
Hmm.
watching this video a year from now, you'll remember the week where oil went below $0 a barrel, WTI, crude oil,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Why did that happen? Because there was too much supply in the market. What's going to happen with automobiles if Hertz, which has a humongous rental fleet, liquidates their assets and none of the other rental car companies want to buy them? What are you going to do? You're going to, I mean,
Yeah.
so, oil didn't go to zero 6 months ago when maybe some people were saying there was too much supply. You had to kind of wait for it to catch up, and maybe we're seeing the makings of something unfortunately similar here, but it could be a great buying opportunity if you're a consumer out there and you're patient. And I know I've had plenty of my peers and friends call me, text me, email me, say, hey, I should wait till the summer to get a used car, right? And I link them back to our videos because it's becoming clear as day every day that passes that the longer you're able to hold out here, the better off you are.
Oh, absolutely. It's just if one of the stats that I read today was that 80% of the population has said, even if the government suddenly says it's okay to go to a bar or it's okay to go to a restaurant, 80% of people won't go. Well, as long as we remain in that situation, then it pays to wait till it's really safer for when people are willing to do those things. And until that time happens, then the value of things as we know them will continue to go down. They just will. I mean, here I sit. Literally, we've talked about this before. That I got my new Mini on December 28th, and I sit here. Today's what, the 24th of April. Okay, and I have 818 miles on that car in almost 4 months because I have nowhere to go. I'm not encouraged to drive to Maryland to go visit with my children because, well, the government suggests that I'm better off staying at home.
For sure. For sure.
Well, as long as we're in that position, then how we use things, when we use things, and what the value of those things is, have to go down.
Yep.
Just they have to if they're not being used. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a movie theater owner. What's going to happen to them when businesses reopen? How do you social distance in a movie theater?
We've talked about this many times before, but I think for our audience and for our purposes, the news about Hertz today is kind of an interesting wake-up call. And everyone hears you loud and clear. We're all aware of the social distancing and physical distancing, the impacts those have. But here, when we talk about cars, when we talk about being your auto advocate, this is the type of information that you can expect when you're listening to us.
I lost you there. You must have a really shitty internet connection because you froze and B, I lost you. And now you're in the red zones. You're freezing again. Yeah. Now you're yellow. Well, you're red. We've got to get this fixed.